All right. Okay, so I got a couple questions. One of them was, what is the hierarchy? Um, so the hierarchy this talks a lot about in psychology. I don't know if it's a psychology thing, but we talked about it a lot. It's referenced a lot. So the hierarchy is the definition is the way that things are slotted in an ascending chart according to value or authority. Uh, okay, what a hierarchy actually is there's two main hierarchies. There's the personal and the social, and the bit of fun psych piece is how those two interplay. But the personal hierarchy is the things that you personally value and the way that you value them. So, for instance, if you have if you're looking at height, right? So you look at height for individuals. As it goes up in value, it also normally goes down it goes up in rarity. So, for instance, if a person says, I want to date somebody who's 6 feet tall, which is 14.5% of the male population in the United States, 6 feet tall or over. So the value and the importance of that specific height, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", comes up. So, for instance, if you interviewed, if you ask somebody what is the perfect height, and they said 6'2" for a man, well, the amount of people who are 6'2" is in that specific spot. And then there's 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", and then 6 foot to 6'2". And so what that ends up doing is it said, okay, so this amount of people are perfect for your individual process. Like you want 6'2", this is the point of that one, and then higher is lesser of value, and shorter is lesser of value. And so what ends up happening is that people are ranked upon that thing. So if someone's 6'1.5", they're more valuable to that person than someone who's 5'11", and so they're more desirable, if you will. They're more sought after. And so that's how that one works for height. Now, the thing is that it works for everything. Remember that it's a sliding scale, right? Here's perfect. This is too tall. This is too short. And it works for pretty much everything you can think of. For instance, there are individual verticals for individual things. So, for instance, if you're looking at a car, and you're like, okay, well, the things that are valuable or sought after in a vehicle. So horsepower is going to be one, torque will be one, styling will be one, comfortable seats, radio, top speed, 0 to 60, exclusivity. One of the reasons that Ferraris and Lamborghinis are so sought after is because they're hard to get. They don't make a whole lot of them. They're really expensive. So having one is kind of special, which is kind of like seeing one. Like, so right now, the Cybertruck has been a big deal because you're like, oh, I saw one. Like, it's rare. And so having something that nobody else has a very, very high appeal value. And so those sort of things all come together as one entity. So when you start looking at an individual, you have to look at kind of what does a person want. And so if someone wants, a guy who's 6 feet tall, which is 14.5% of the population, and then you also want somebody who makes over 100K. I think the combination of those is like 3% of the male population in the United States. So as you get more specific, it narrows it down more and more and more. And so you can look at the hierarchy from a standpoint of individual tasks. So you're like, okay, height is one. And so whatever society or a person deems as the perfect height would be that type of thing, would be that position. And then the percentage of people who are that height, are going to give you a breakdown of individual people. So for instance, like I said, 6 feet tall or over, 14.5%. Men who are 6 feet tall who also make over 100K is 3%. There's a whole bunch of shorter guys who make, over 100K, but these two things together, it narrows it down even more, filters it down even more. And so that's kind of how the hierarchy works. And so if you want to look at across the board, it's, the individual will be like, okay, I want someone who's this tall, who makes this much money, who, is this type of religion, who is, this type of person, this type of family. So you gather all this information, and all together that ranks people where they are in this hierarchy. The thing is basically your value. Now, the fun thing about that is that once you kind of come up with your own, like you're building an avatar, if you will, you build your own. Like here's the things that are all the things that are important to me. What ends up happening is that is greatly shaped by society, and so society can kind of come in and manipulate those numbers a little bit, which is very, very interesting. That gets into a giant conversation of morals and values, and core values and stuff like that, which is really, really, really fun to kind of get into, because as you start to understand, the whole concept of if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. So if you don't have this, these are the things that are important to me, you allow society to create that for you. And that's where the site comes in. It's super, super fun. When you start looking at kind of that and how society plays into interpersonal demands and needs and wants. But again, way different conversation for a different time. But it's a much longer, deeper thing. It's very, very fun to actually look at. But that's how the hierarchy is set up. And so if you're looking at an individual, or you're looking at yourself and you're saying, okay, where do I sit on the hierarchy of desire and need? That's where a lot of that is. And so there's things you can do, like percentage of people who have 10% body fat are very low. People who have X amount of muscle mass, or people who can bench press 225 pounds, or whatever it is. That's how you can kind of see yourself as a reflection of everybody else in society. Now, here's the thing. Just because you can do a thing doesn't mean people care. So, for instance, there's a lot of very insecure people who don't like tall women. However, there's a lot of guys who actually like tall women. So it's one of those things where you can also use the hierarchy to figure out, this is who I am, this is who I want to be, where's my target market? And that's kind of like building the avatar. So that's how the hierarchy works. You guys can look into the hierarchy function, things that are important to people in general. It's kind of how the hierarchy sets up and works out. And whether or not it's the right thing to do, it's what everybody does. Everybody judges people on some type of hierarchical standard according to them. So, for instance, a lot of people will really like an actor, and then find out that actor is either conservative or liberal, and then decide they don't like that person anymore because they've decided that the most important thing in their hierarchy is conservative or liberal values, which that's fine. That's just how we do it. So that's kind of how that thing plays out. If you look into the hierarchy, you start kind of getting into it. It's very, very interesting. There's a lot of things that are in it. You're like, oh, I didn't know that about myself. Like, I didn't know that I valued that thing. Because it's kind of fun. Then you can kind of look at, like, what has society done to shape what we want and what we value and what we hold as important. Like I said, that's where all the site comes in and gets super interesting. The other question I got was about the calorie thing, which I will talk about this forever. Calories aren't really a thing. The question was, it was basically about, why do I feel like calories don't exist? Here's the thing. The definition of a calorie, we'll do this the long way because I don't want to argue about this. The definition of a calorie is the amount of energy required to move 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius. The thing is that the calories that we talk about as far as people go, we're not talking about calories, we're talking about kilocalories or kcalories. A kcalorie, the definition of that, is the amount of energy required to move 1 kilogram of water 1 degree Celsius, or 1 liter. That's why the metric system is better, because we actually have everything tied together. So 1 liter of water is 2.2 pounds, which is also a kilogram. So the amount of energy required to move a liter of water 1 degree Celsius. There's lots and lots of problems with using calories as a function. First of all, if you go by definition, what would have to happen is if a 220-pound man, which is 100 kilograms, ate 2,000 calories, he would go up 20 degrees Celsius in temperature if we were using calories, because calories increase water and our bodies are vastly water. And so if you eat 2,000 calories and you don't get any warmer, by definition, we're not using calories. The biggest issue is that how does that unit of energy, that measurement of energy, turn into a physical thing? So what you're telling me is that if you eat too many calories, instead of being hot, your body magically turns that energy into a physical thing, turns it into a lipid. Well, our bodies don't do that. Your body doesn't take energy and convert it into matter. Like we're not replicators from Star Trek. That's not how it works. So if you're looking at well, I've taken this much energy. If I've taken too much energy, my body magically turns it into a physical thing and turns it into a lipid. That's not how it works. What happens is that the foods you eat create hormonal responses telling your body to do certain things. If you bring in too many sugars, your body raises the insulin hormone. The insulin hormone tells it to store all those things. Once it's stored as glycogen in the muscles and in the liver, the excess is turned into a fat in the body. That's how the hormones work. Amino acids produced from proteins excite glucagon, and that increases the body's utilization of fat for energy. As far as when I say energy, it turns it into ATP. So it uses that fat to produce ATP, which is this is the chemical that the body uses to actually do work. So that's kind of how those two play together. It's a little bit more involved in that. It's actually as the glucose levels come down, the body releases the glucagon, but the way that you get the glucose levels to come down is you stop getting glucose. You stop consuming it, your body will then make it because it has to have it for the blood. It makes it through gluconeogenesis, which is initiated by the loss of glucose in stimulating glucagon production to then start the process of gluconeogenesis, which is why keto diets work, which is why semaglutide works. Semaglutide is basically glucagon. That's why all those things work. In the calorie system tells you that proteins are worth 4 and carbohydrates are worth 4. So what the calorie system tells you is that hormones don't matter. They're not real. That all we're working on is that carbohydrates, sugars, and proteins work exactly the same way in the body, and that's ludicrous. There's no chemistry that shows that. In fact, chemistry literally shows the exact opposite. So utilizing a system that by definition makes no sense, by chemistry makes no sense, and that if you actually look at the chemistry is radically opposed to the system you're using. That's why I tell people not to use it. To actually just look at the macros, figure out the gram function you need, monitor the hormones, and that's the best, easiest way to go about doing manipulating muscle mass or fat loss in a healthy manner. And so I get it, everybody else uses it, but that doesn't mean it's right. I mean, all the medical doctors use BMI, which is by far the funniest thing that medical scientists try to convince people is important. Because how tall you are and how much you weigh has absolutely no bearing on your health. I'm right at 6 feet tall, and I'm 240 pounds. And so every single medical doctor who uses the BMI, which is all of them, will tell you that I'm wildly unhealthy and that I'm going to have diabetes and I'm about to die and I'm going to have heart attacks because how tall I am and how much I weigh, they correlate very, very importantly. And it's trash. There's a whole lot of people who are good in the BMI who are wildly unhealthy. And the funny thing is that they'll tell you, they'll be like, well, people who diet and exercise, the BMI doesn't really work right for it. And you're like, well, don't you tell your patients to diet and exercise? They're like, well, yeah. Like, so if your patients do what you tell them to do, your measurement system doesn't work on that. Well, yes, but that's still the system you're going to use to measure them. Yes. Cool. All right, yeah. It's shocking that you guys don't get anybody better. You guys just maintain disease for the rest of life. So anyway, that's kind of those are those two questions. The hierarchy is kind of it's a little bit involved. So if you're wondering about look into that. It's from a psych standpoint, it's really, really, really interesting. Just because the way that human civilization has kind of developed itself, but it's also highly manipulable. So again, when you understand the ways that you're being manipulated, you can kind of just recognizing it can kind of give you a little barrier on it. So look into the hierarchy stuff, especially if there's a lot of guys who are like, who are wondering why they're not, and girls wondering whether or not it's sought after. Look at the hierarchy. That's literally what everybody this is the roadmap of what everybody wants. So figure out how you fit in that categories and then make yourself better. That's the easiest way to do it. So, all right, thanks for your time. If you guys have any questions, hit us up in the comments or the DMs again, or send us an email at questions@chalmerswellness.com. Thanks for your time.